Hello boys and girls, and welcome back to our Unit 9 Lecture 1 dealing with the Middle Ages, and today's lesson on the causes and effects of the Middle Ages. As per usual, if you want to make sure you have your Lecture 1 worksheet available with you, or you can click on the screen and we'll get that link to you right away, and you can answer those questions as we go along with this lecture. Please make sure, as again per usual, that if you have any questions, please let me know right away, and we will get those problems and questions figured out for you right away. And with that, let us get started. So, before we get into the notes, I want you to consider a question real quick. If our American government disappeared today, how would our lives be different tomorrow? Or the next month? Or next year? So that if our president took a holiday in Hawaii forever, our Congress said adios forever, let's see, what would that be like? We would have no money because the government gives us the money and they back the money. We would have no trash service, no sewage, so there'd be crap floating everywhere. There would be no road construction or streetlights, no police, fire, utilities, things like that. There'd be no schools. Oh wait, I'd be fired or out of a job. Yeah, that wouldn't be good. So, think about that question as we're kind of going forward with this, because it's kind of exactly what happened after the Roman Empire fell in the late 400s AD. So, let us get a move on here. Causes of the Middle Ages. The time period that we're talking about existed between the time of the Roman Empire and that of the Renaissance. More specifically, the end of the Roman Empire and the beginning of the Renaissance. This lasted roughly 1,000 years between 500 AD and 1500 AD. There are several other names that the Middle Ages goes by, including the Dark Ages or the Medieval Ages or Medieval period. A lot of times they were called the Dark Ages, especially in Europe particularly, because there was not a lot of hope going around back then. Everything was kind of bleak, if you want to call that. Everything seemed kind of very bleak and dangerous. And the Dark Ages was just like, wasn't very enlightened. There wasn't any really new ideas, new inventions, new concepts, new type of thinking or philosophy. Things were just kind of going at a snail's pace during the Dark Ages. However, if we want to stretch the look and get outside of Europe, we can actually see many innovations that were going on in China, India. Architecture was going on in Spain. Most of the regions that were not Christian were actually doing quite well during this time period. But for the purposes of our unit, we're going to focus specifically on Central Europe. So, as we mentioned before, the fall of Rome was kind of the beginning of the medieval period, or the Dark Ages. And in this picture, we kind of see the different Germanic tribes from the north going and defeating Rome. And, wait a sec, is that the Capitol building? They're in Washington, D.C.? Oh no, that's not the Capitol building. No, that's the Coliseum. Looks a lot like the Capitol building from here, though, if you look really close. Nope, that's just the Capitol building, or the Coliseum. So, Germanians, or Germanic tribes from the north, came on down into Rome from the north, as I just said, and started taking over. They first surrounded Rome, cutting off a lot of its different resources, cut off trade, which we'll talk about, got rid of some of its water resources, thereby making it almost impossible to survive. In the end, Rome kind of had to give up, and the Germanians came on and took everything over, almost burned the city down to a crisp, and then left, leaving basically no structures or no infrastructure, no leadership, no Caesar, and everybody was kind of out for themselves. At this time, the people, even before this time period, the people decided just to leave town and kind of go into the rural, do their own thing kind of mode. Just illustrates right here some of the Germanic invasions that occurred throughout the empire. If you look here, the Germanians came in from the top left. Actually, this is where the Huns came in, kind of pushing the Germanians, who are the guys in the blue here, known as the Visigoths, down into South Italy, past Rome, and even further south into Sicily. So the Huns came in, these are the guys in the green, kind of pushed the Germanians around, and eventually forcing them to push their way south into Rome. Causes. Number 2A. The fall of Rome was caused by, as I mentioned, the invading Germanic armies and tribes. The invasions disrupted a lot of things. The invasions ended up leading to the disruption of trade. Merchant trades collapsed and European economic centers were destroyed. Money also became very scarce. As the Germans were coming down, they were pretty much conquering everything along their way, thereby making trade virtually impossible. And the fact that prior to this, there was this high inflation of money that Rome had. Money was not worth as much as it used to be. Another downfall was the downfall of the cities. Cities were abandoned as centers of administration. People could not live in the major cities anymore because there was lack of trade, lack of money, because of those are usually the first places that the Germanians came to hit. The people didn't want anything to do with them. So the cities were kind of left abandoned. Additionally, number 3, Europe became rural, which means a lot of people did not live in the main city centers. They might have had little townships, things like that. But in all, Romans left cities without strong leadership. The towns were kind of small, haphazard, owned by some sort of lord in the region, which we'll talk about in the next slide, but not very strong leadership throughout these time periods in these little villages. There was also a decline of learning. Germanic invaders could not read or write. Because they took over, the Germanic tribes that ended up staying there did not find a need for education, for reading and writing. Learning became less important as people moved into rural areas. The primary thinking back then was that you needed to survive. To survive, you needed to know how to do a trade and do some sort of agriculture. That was the important thing. Reading and writing wasn't all that important in order for a family's survival. It was important to be able to understand how to count money, but even that wasn't always a guarantee within the household. Money was a big deal because you needed to be able to know if you're trading your goods, trading your crops, you need to make sure you're getting a fair deal, instead of possibly being screwed out of money that you could have earned, but because you don't know how to count, then you're screwing yourself on that when you're trying to do trade. But reading and writing really didn't exist. There was a loss of common language. Latin changed as Germanic people mixed with the Roman population. As the Germanians came in, Latin was really no longer the official language. All these different subset of languages started being created as these groups tried to communicate. So we have the new languages like Spanish, French, Slovakian. All these different other languages started to become more prevalent as time went on because of the lack of one central or common language. There's also a loss of, as I mentioned, an official language. The Germanic tribes did not have written laws nor a governing body for ruling purposes. So everybody was kind of on their own, to their own devices, to their own set of warlords, you could call them, that would come around and take over a region and set up their own local government. And you were kind of bound by that local government that that warlord